So today I'm gonna do a video that I kind of came up with this idea after I replied to the person that commented in my review between Portland Timbers versus RSL in the Western Conference Final, and I thought I'm gonna do a rankings where I look at these 12 Western Conference team and see who exactly is gonna be that team that finally dethrones the Portland Timbers or the Seattle Sounder of taking the crown of the Western Conference every single year, because ever since 2015 no team has been able to take the Western Conference crown and represent the West in MLS Cup besides the Portland Timbers and the Seattle Sounders. And believe it or not, I thought this year was finally going to be the year that's going to be different, because especially with the Sounders losing to RSL in a shocking fashion, and then of course the Timbers heading into that Western Conference final without two of their best attacker, I thought this was going to be it. But then, yeah, RSL decided to kind of ruin that by representing the team that might do it. And I'm not saying that RSL didn't have a chance to make it to MLS Cup. Knowing the fact that they were getting their best player in Albert Rusnak, and as I mentioned, the Timbers without Aspria and also Blanco. I thought the RSL was going to do it once again and continue the Cinderella run, and then it did not continue, and they fall on the final hurdle, and it means that once again a team that is either named the Timbers or the Sounders are moving into MLS Cup. And like I said, the purpose of this video is just kind of talk about which is going to be finally that Western Conference team that hopefully next year is going to finally dethrone the Sounders or the Timbers of being the crown of the Western Conference. And I'm of course going to include Nashville and Vancouver in this video because for Nashville, for those that don't know, they of course will be moving to the Western Conference at least for a year, because I think after next season Nashville most likely is going to be back in the Eastern Conference with the way that St. Louis is going to be coming into the league in 2023. And then of course Vancouver, even though I know they are a Cascadia team, and a lot of people have said that they are the forgotten Cascadia team, and even if they of course move on into MLS Cup and continue that Cascadia streak of 8 consecutive seasons a Cascadia team have made it to MLS Cup, I'm pretty sure everybody would rather want the Vancouver Whitecaps to do so, consider again they're the only Cascadia team out of those 3 that have not represented or have not made it to MLS Cup in their franchise history. So we start with number 12, which is the least likeliest, and that of course is the Houston Dynamo. So I mentioned before, the Dynamo, next season it is definitely a rebuilding year. They are a team that has a new GM in Pat Onstead, and soon to potentially getting a new head coach for next season. And again, I just think that there is probably no way that they could be dethroned the best team in the Western Conference when they're clearly in rebuilding mode next season. I mean, I don't think this team is going to make the playoffs next year, and that this is going to be year one of probably a deep rebuild that they're going to be going through. Although maybe a couple of years down the line, if the Sounders or the Timbers are still dominating and are still one of those 2 teams that make it to MLS Cup, and that Houston might get out of this deep rebuild of them and start to challenge some of those teams, maybe they might have a shot. But for now, they're probably the least likeliest that is going to challenge those 2 teams in terms of finally dethroning them in the Western Conference crown. And another team that is going to be least likeliest is their interstate rival, that is FC Dallas. So again, for FC Dallas, they are a team where heading into next season there's a lot of unknown about what's going to happen with this team. I mean, they're going to have their best player in Ricardo Pepi not be with that team next season, because he's already openly submit a transfer request and want to make the jump to Europe, and losing him is definitely going to be a huge blow to this Dallas team. But it's something that they're kind of maybe prepared for, because when you're a team that produce good young talent, especially from the academy, you're going to have to of course deal with that. And that being said, if they're going to continue to follow this route, I don't see how they can maybe, unless if they finally can maybe make some decent signing, then maybe they can definitely be like that FC Dallas team that we saw a couple of years ago, winning the Supporters Shield and came oh so close of representing the West in MLS Cup. But until then, I don't think it's likely that Dallas is going to really challenge for the West and be that team that dethrone the Sounders and the Timbers for that Western Conference crown. But now moving on to number 10, and hey, let's make it 3 Texas team in a row. And again, I just want to remind you that this is not a prediction in terms of the standings of next season, and I don't predict the fact that we're going to once again have three Texas team finish at the bottom of the Western Conference like we did this season. But out of those 3 Texas teams, that I would say that most likely has the best chance to maybe sneak into that conversation of beating those 2 Cascadia team to the crown of the Western Conference, it's got to be Austin FC. And I've mentioned before how I love what this Austin team done, especially in the second half of the season, where there's actually hope that this team can actually be decent. I mean, this team started to finally figure out the goal scoring form, and although there's been times where they have kind of maybe show some inconsistency in terms of that, at least it's much better compared to the beginning of the season where they just could not score at all. Like they just had a lot of issue with that, and even though their defense for most part was kind of good throughout the season, when you don't score goals, you're not going to win games. But especially with, as I mentioned, with the way that they finished the season and how they had a really strong second half of the season, and not to mention they're definitely going to be building more pieces into the squad. I think this team is definitely a team that out of, as I mentioned, out of all the 3 of these Texas teams, this team probably has the best hope of not only making the playoffs, but maybe go on like a Cinderella run that RSL has, which is just sneak into the playoffs, and next thing you know, you're in the Western Conference Final. Now, at number 9, I am going to say it's going to be the San Jose Earthquakes. So, of course, for the Quakes, the thing I will say that I would give hope to the Quakes is the fact that, with Chris Leach being the GM of the team, actually, I should write the full name. I'll just write the initial, with the hope that, he is now the GM, he can maybe fix up this team a little bit. I mean, this team, I think that last year with Almeida, it was kind of a typical Almeida kind of season where there was some high points and then there was some really low point, and I'm hoping maybe that this year that's going to buckle the trend. And, not to mention the fact that, I think this is going to be an interesting thing off season for the Quakes, because when you look at some of the off season move that they've already made, they got rid of a lot of the debt weight off their team, which is definitely a good thing because it definitely freed up some money in terms of signing players, and I'm expecting Chris Leach is going to be very busy this off season, making some move and hope to improve that squad. And if it's going to be in a way that it's good enough, I think they could be a team that, again, just like what I said with Austin, maybe sneak it into the playoffs and maybe be that Cinderella team to somehow end up in the Western Conference Final. But now moving on to number 8, and speaking of that team that I kind of mentioned, that team, of course, is RSL, where, like I said, they were very close of potentially being that team to dethrone from the Sounders or the Timbers, or in that case, the Portland Timbers, so being the first team in the Western Conference to make it to MLS Cup that is not named those 2 teams. And although it was quite incredible that the run that they had in the Western Conference, I doubt it's going to happen again next season. Like, when you look at this team, I mean, it almost felt like it was a movie script with how this season has gone. A team that has no owner whatsoever, a team that has been caught with a lot of chaotic thing, and having their head coach decided to kind of jump ship and join a much more successful team in the middle of the season to hope to kind of chase for a ring. Yeah, you just could not write better script with the way that they overcome all that adversity and came oh so close to finally be that team to represent in the Western Conference that's not named the Timbers or the Sounders. But, for me, if RSL is going to do it for the second year in a row, first of all, they need to, of course, have an owner. I think, some of the moves that they, of course, have been making has really been moves that they can't really control that much, because the league, of course, still kind of owns this team and control all the transaction and all the movement that this team has. But if this team does have a good owner, and then they can kind of start building on this team, that this team definitely had some talent in itself. And I think there's no doubt that this could be an RSL team that maybe once again could make a good run heading into next season in the playoffs. But like I said, I feel like the run that they had this season was more. I wouldn't say it was kind of a fluke, because if I say that, that would really anger a lot of RSL fan, and it would not do any justice of the resilience that they have shown throughout this playoffs. But do I think it's going to happen again for the second year in a row, and they can go on another Cinderella run like they did in the playoffs next season? Probably not. So yeah. But now moving on to number 7, and that of course is the LA Galaxy. So for the Galaxy, we know that this year was a very disappointing year with the way that they literally missed out on the playoffs on the final day, and that was actually the only time that they, of course, were out of the playoff position. And I know in the beginning of the year there was a lot of people talk about how it seems like the Galaxy, of course, are back and they're trying to become the team that is going to challenge for MLS Cup. And then reality really set in, and they had that horror run that they had in the second half of the season. Now the good news is they did start to kind of get rid of some of the dead weight in their team, and this has started to be a time where Greg Vanney is starting to kind of build this team that he envisioned to kind of be similar to the TFC team that of course made it get to MLS Cup out of the Eastern Conference. And I also would say that if there's any head coach that can potentially beat those two giants of the Cascadia team, it's Greg Vanney, because he's done it before. I mean, with TFC, he have knocked out Seattle already once in an MLS Cup. I mean, I know the other two time was not the case, although I'm pretty sure in 2016 he would feel like his team should have definitely deserved the win with how that game, of course, went. And I don't really need to talk about what happened in that 2016 MLS Cup. You probably know what happened in that game. But nevertheless, I trust the fact that he's going to build a decent team that, again, this purpose of this video isn't just kind of talk about, just next year, maybe all these teams eventually will end the streak, but just kind of down the line, let's say if both the Timbers or the Sounders still kind of dominating the West and still reach MLS Cup and representing the West down the line, we're going to eventually have some of these teams that could eventually catch them, and the Galaxy, I think, is definitely one of those teams. Now, moving on to number 6, and that, of course, is the Vancouver Whitecaps. So, again, the Whitecaps, I think they are a team that they're getting close to be ready to be that contender of the Western Conference, and they show in there the latter part of the stretch where it was pretty clear that they were going through a very confident stretch, under Vinny Sartini with his crazy kind of post game conference and stuff like that. But like I said, they were going for a very confident stretch, and if they can kind of rediscover that heading into next season, and not to mention adding more good players to this team, then the Whitecaps definitely has a chance. And again, I know the Whitecaps is a Cascadia team, but I'm pretty sure everybody wants to see the Whitecaps to win, even if that does extend the streak of a Cascadia team reaching to MLS Cup in the Western Conference. And I think there's even somewhere a joke about how that of course eventually is going to happen, like maybe somewhere 2076, which I don't think it's going to be that long. I have a feeling eventually the Whitecaps would be that team that is the best of the West, and it could be as soon as next year if they can maybe add some more pieces, and hopefully guys that they have already known that are decent players like Ryan Gold and Brian White can continue to have an incredible run that they had in the latter part of the season. Now, at number 5, that of course is LAFC, and I know theoretically the media would say that, well, the West is basically dominated by the Timbers and the Sounders, but in our hearts, LAFC is that team that can of course do so, and they probably will say that they're number 1 in terms of that team that finally knock off the dominance of the Timbers and the Sounders. Now, the reason why I don't pick them at number 1 is because there's still a lot of question in terms of the team, and it all starts with the head coaching position. Now Bob Bradley leave LAFC, which I don't think that was the best decision on LAFC part. I mean, I know his contract was ended, and I know this was not a good season for this team, but I don't fully blame Bob Bradley for the reason why LAFC weren't able to make it to the playoffs. Like, there was a lot of underachieving that was going on in this LAFC team, but if the other big question that you also have with this team is, what's the future of Carlos Vela? Is he going to maybe stick around? As there was some there's definitely some rumor that he could, of course, be potentially going back to Europe. And also, when they do get a new head coach in, is he going to be as successful as what Bob Brantley is? And also, are they going to once again be like that team that's going to try to spend some money to finally find a talented player to replace some of the names that they of course have lost? And also, not to mention, I almost forgot that Diego Rossi, is he gonna maybe come back to LAFC? Because remember, even though he is with Fenerbahce right now, it's only on a loan move, and I haven't heard anything about Diego Rossi and how he has done with Fenerbahce. But let's say if he hasn't done well with the team, and if he does come back on from that loan and rejoin LAFC, this team could be a dangerous team again and could definitely make a run again. And I also think that people forgot that this also was a team that came very close in terms of finally ending that Sounders Timbers dominance that we had in the West. If they only they weren't able to fall in the final hurdle against the Seattle Sounder back in that 2019 Western Conference Final. Now, at number 4, I'm going to say Minnesota United. Now, I originally was thinking about moving them much lower than this, and I probably should have done it because there has been some breaking news that happened today regards of Emmanuel Reynoso and how there is an alleged kind of domestic assault that he has, where he basically assaulted a minor down in Argentina. And I'm hoping that these are just some rumors and some alleged thing that probably is not correct, because if it is going to be true, and that if the investigation does find that he of course commit that crime, there's no way that the Loons will be keeping Reynoso. I mean, as important as Reynoso is to this team, you definitely do not want to keep a player that has known to commit some domestic violence in his record. And without Reynoso, this team, that's going to be a tough spot for this team to try to find a replacement for him. And I don't know if they're going to maybe find a replacement. But let's say on the brighter side, Reynoso didn't really do anything well, and that was just some allegation that of course is not true, and he will be with this team. I really think this team can be much better heading into next season. I think this team massively underachieved last season. In some way, will say the same reason that I said with LAFC, where they really underachieved with the talent that they had. And I'm really hoping that heading into next season, these players will that we have with it eventually live up to the potential. And also, not to mention, I think the other thing that the Loons need to do if they want to be once again consider an MLS Cup, besides the fact that they need to add more attacker, because I think that's kind of something that's very tempted to say, but they need to freshen up that back line. Like, that back line has started to really age badly, and while that back line with the likes of Boxall and DeBassi is definitely a decent back line, you can definitely saw that there was some tear and wear down the stretch, and that again they really need to freshen up that back line a little bit, and really need to find some potential replacement, or guys that is a little bit younger to kind of relieve the pressure for those guys that is a back line that is kind of aging badly right now. But now moving on to number 3, and now we're getting to the point where these are most likely the team that could dethrone the Timbers and the Sounders of that Western Conference crown. And I'm going to go with Nashville SC. So, again, Nashville, of course, even though they're temporarily going to be in the Western Conference next season, this is a dangerous team. I mean, they've shown it in the Eastern Conference. And yes, I know they didn't really get that far, and I'm pretty sure they're kind of very disappointed that they got eliminated in the second round of the playoffs. But what I like about this Nashville team is that this is a team that has a very stify defense, and not to mention they also have a potential MVP winner in Hani Mukhtar, pulling up the string. And that I kind of also envision this Nashville team kind of similar to that Seattle Sounders team, where the Sounders is a team that from last season they play good defense, and they have a good number 10 in Ladero. And that really the only thing that Nashville is missing from that the Sounders currently does have is Raul Ruidiaz. And I think if Nashville can get that Raul Ruidiaz or that number 9 that they've been looking for a very, very long time, then this could be a really dangerous team in the West next year. And it would be kind of ironic the fact that it actually took an Eastern Conference team to finally knock off the two Cascadia team from the crown of the Western Conference. But I think Nashville does have a chance to do so. Now, at number 2, I'm going to say the Colorado Rapids. So, the Rapids, I know this year it kind of ended in a certain way that they definitely did not they would not be happy about with them losing in the first round against the Portland Timbers at home. But I truly believe that this Rapids team is not going to go away. This team is going to once again be very strong heading into next year. I mean, I trust the fact that Robin Fraser will definitely guide his team to have another good regular season next year. But I think next year maybe there will be more focus about the fact that, we will, once we of course make it to the playoffs, we can maybe now finally learn from these previous 2 years where we got knocked out in our first playoff game and finally go deep into the playoffs. And not to mention the fact that the Rapids also is a team that has some DP spot open, and it will all depend on whether or not if they decide to spend some money, which that's been kind of one of the criticism for the Rapids lately, where they don't really spend as much money. They're kind of a team that is trying to work on a shoestring budget and kind of trying to do a money ball approach that really worked out in the regular season, and then it kind of didn't work out in the playoffs. And now hopefully maybe they'll see it as a way where the money ball approach definitely worked well, but now let's go the next step and maybe find that number 10 or maybe that number 9 goal score DP player to add on to our team, and that next season we could even be much stronger and could go deeper into the playoffs. And then at number 1, I am going to say it's Sporting KC, and this was supposed to be the team that I thought was going to end that dominance that the Sounders and the Timbers had this year. Like, if they did not lose to RSL, I truly believe that they could beat the Portland Timbers, especially with the way that that Sporting KC have not forgotten about what happened in 2018, and that they definitely want revenge against the Timbers to move on into the Western Conference Final. But unfortunately, they kind of took RSL maybe a little bit too lightly, and that it was another disappointing ending to a season where I thought this was a team that, I even said it all regular season long. I thought if there was one team out of the Western Conference that could potentially knock off Seattle, who was back then considered to be the team to make it out of the West as a team that represented the West in the MLS Cup, I thought it would be Sporting KC, and heading into the playoffs, it looked like that was going to be the case. And again, if it wasn't for that RSL loss, I think they would have beat the Portland Timbers at home. So, heading into next season, despite the what ifs that they had in the playoffs, they're going to definitely be very, very strong once again. And I'm pretty sure Peter Vermees maybe will learn from his mistake a little bit of the fact that maybe he shouldn't just run that team down the ground. Down the stretch, because I think a lot of the problem that Sporting KC had down the stretch, besides that shock defeat that they had against RSL, is that Peter Vermees kind of run his team down the ground, and some of his players was not 100% fit heading into the playoffs. And when you have players that is not 100% fit, and even if it's your star player, that could really be a difference heading into the playoffs. But again, there's no doubt that I think SKC is going to once again challenge for that Western Conference crown. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this rankings? And do you agree with this ranking? Do you disagree with it? Is there some teams that I might put a little bit too high? Is there some teams that I might put a little bit too low? But let's just be sure that maybe next year is finally going to be the year that we're going to see a different team that is not named the Portland Timbers or the Seattle Sounder making the MLS Cup, because after all, I think everybody can agree that they're kind of tired of that, and let's just hope maybe that is going to be the case. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys hit a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.